Hey, what's up guys? Rago here from MACkite. So today I'm going to do a review on the new 15 meter D-Lab Juice from Duotone. And this is a kite that I've been curious about for a while because I've done some videos about the lighter fabrics and how I felt that the biggest difference you're going to feel with these new materials is going to be with the lighter wind kites. And with the Juice, this has been a long-standing kite from Duotone, very good, well-built, high-performance light wind kite. So what happens when you take this kite, you put the lighter bridles, you put the Lula material on there, and I guess the big question probably on everybody's mind is it worth the upgrade in cost? Because let's be honest, D-Lab is not cheap. This has got to be the most expensive kite I've ever even heard of. So I've done some thorough testing on this now. I do have an opinion and I will share that opinion with you here today. So with my very first test on the Juice, I had more than enough ample power on it. It was up and down, gusty wind, and my first take was, oh wow, this still feels like a Juice. This is the familiar bar pressure, familiar feedback, familiar response. It still feels like the high performance, light wind, free ride kite that I've come to expect from the Juice. Wow, that was a lot of generic terms, wasn't it? To clarify, I've always thought the Juice was a very efficient kite. I always thought that had a good feel. I always thought that it had a good response with light bar pressure. And when I say performance, what I mean is, for a light wind kite, it is quick, it does jump well, and I like the way that it loops for hand drag based tricks. And I was able to get out and test it in some not so light wind conditions, and for those sessions, you know, it felt like a Juice to me. It was that same familiar feel. It looped like a Juice, it flew like a Juice, meaning if you are somebody who is familiar with this kite, you know the bar pressure, you know the feedback, you know how this kite loops, you know what it feels like. Now, coming back around, my last session, I was able to get out on the Juice in extremely light wind. I mean, it must have been about 8 to 12 knots. Most notable right away is obviously this is one of the lightest light wind kites you will ever get your hands on. So with this Alula material, there's not much there. It's such a light feeling kite, and it's also light feeling in the sky. So moving on to the real test, what we all want to know is, what's the efficacy of this kite? What are you getting going for the D-Lab kite? So I was out on the water the other day. There were two other kites out there, 17 meter turbine, 15 core something, whatever the light wind kite is. And the two guys were out there, actually came back in as I was pumping up. And when I asked them how conditions were, they didn't feel that it was really doable. They were gonna call it a day. In their words, it wasn't worth fighting that much for wind. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this is gonna be a pretty good test for the D-Lab in extreme light wind conditions. I have a North Trace light wind specific board. I have this 15 meter D-Lab. Let's see what we can do. So I popped the kite up and sheeting in, obviously it felt like there was no power. The kite has extremely light bar pressure, and I was kind of questioning if I could even make it happen. But I figured, hey, why not? Let's give it a go. So I got on the water, and my first surprise was how little work on my end it took to ride upwind. I mean, again, this is anecdotal. I didn't have a wind meter, but it felt like 8 to probably 12 knots. And yeah, the kite on the low end, I didn't have to do like a whole lot of like work on my end. I had to sign the kite to generate apparent wind, but the combination of the light wind board and this light wind material kite, it was just very easy to create apparent wind, and I was rocking upwind. And as soon as the wind would gust up a little bit closer to the higher end of that range, maybe around that 10, 11, 12 knots, I was pleasantly surprised at how well I was able to turn the session around and actually jump and do tricks. And I think that's what's most notable about the D-Lab is, aside from the fact that I could keep the kite in the sky with minimal effort because there wasn't a whole lot of canopy there or other materials weighing the kite down, making it want to fall or backstall when the wind was super light, but also just how responsive these kites are. So again, coming back to this, if you're a new rider, you may not notice this. If you're an experienced rider, if you know how to sign a kite in light wind, you're going to be so pleased with the extra bottom end that you can generate with this. And I think that's really the secret sauce of all these lighter wind material kites, is somebody who is more experienced, they can scrape more bottom end out of their kite because it is easier to work the kite, it's lighter, and you can generate that apparent wind. If you pair this with a very efficient light wind board, that Trace, for example, which I have a review coming out where I talk about how it feels more like a hybrid of performance, like a regular twin tip and a light wind board. And to be candid, this session felt like a normal session on a 12 meter and a regular board in 17 to 18 knots. And what I mean is I was able to do all the same tricks that I normally like to do. I didn't feel like I was working too hard. Everything was way more effortless than it should have been. And I think that's just a testament to these new technologies. Now, as I was riding, as the wind was getting a little bit better and being more sustained around that 12 knots, I was able to get some pretty good jumps, actually, like unexpectedly good height. And I tried a few kite loops as well, just because the Juice is one kite that I've done videos before where I do enjoy looping a Juice, not kite loops where you're catching yourself, mind yourself. I talk about this a lot with light wind kites, but for the hand drags, the dark slides, or even just jumps where you just redirect the kite and then you kind of land riding away because you didn't go super high. And one thing that does really stand out on the Juice, the D-Lab, but the Juice in general, is it does loop really well, and it has a really good consistent feeling kite loop to it that you know, a good solid predictable forward throw. And this is just one that I personally enjoy looping on. The big question here really is it worth the premium that you're getting in contrast to, say, other light wind kites? And what I will say is, because they are lighter, if you were new, you would notice that it stayed up in less wind than, say, a standard light wind kite, but you might not get any benefits with a low end. That would come back around if you were somebody who was maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years into your riding, where you knew how to create apparent wind, how to sign a kite, how to be efficient with your edge. And if you have that skill set, then yes, you are going to get some more low end out of this kite. It will make a difference. And as well, I think I've mentioned this previously in an Alula video, that the big kites, they feel like lighter kites. So I referenced that my session on this 15 meter felt like a 12 meter session. It very much did. In my mind, I never felt like I was flying a big clunky 15 meter kite. I felt like I was out in 17 knots, 18 knots on a 12 meter kite. It felt just like that to me. And that's really what you're getting out of a kite like this, is a big kite that feels a bit more like a smaller kite. That ability to stay up in the lighter winds when it really tapers off, and then the fact that it's pretty effortless to generate a little extra power with a kite like this. So if you want to have more fun in your light wind sessions, or you just live somewhere like Florida, where I'm based right now, where you have so many light wind days, you are going to get more sessions with a kite like this, and that might justify the increase in the price to some people. And if you're not, you know, you're just going to work a little harder with a regular Juice. It's just going to feel a little heavier, but you can certainly make it work. I've made it work for years in light wind locations with non-Alula kites. Absolutely doable. You're basically just buying like a knot or two on the bottom end there. Now, as well, moving on to trying to find critical points to talk about kites. Like any light wind kite, there is definitely a point of diminishing returns where a kite like this is going to feel overpowered. So once the wind starts coming up, and this did happen to me later in the afternoon, the wind started picking up 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 knots, etc. There is definitely a point where the kite will start pulling you more downwind than it actually is pulling you upwind. And circling back around to a positive, in contrast to a lot of other light wind kites, when you're using the D-Lab in its appropriate wind range, it is so effortless. It's not pulling on your harness. It doesn't have oppressive bar pressure. you don't get tired using it. And that's, I think, another huge benefit to this D-Lab in general, the lighter material kites, is they're easier on the body. We all know with light wind kites that they take a bit of work, they tend to pull forward. Sometimes you're kind of fighting against them, and that is not the case with this kite. It's just such an effortless kite to use, and I guess, I hate to say it, but it is in a lot of ways superior. They have done an incredible job designing something that flies effortlessly and does exactly what it's supposed to do. Now, you're not going to notice this, and I guess this probably comes down to your weight. It does take a little while to get lit, and I did ride with this kite lit, and it was still manageable. My core did get a little bit sore when it was getting up to like 18 knots, but it wasn't like I felt the need to come off the water by any means. I was able to keep sessioning. I didn't feel the urge to get off the water, but I will say, pairing it with that light wind trace, it was getting hard to control my edge at the end of the session, because there was just so much power being generated from the kite, so much power being generated from the board, that it was getting to be a bit much with controlling my edge for a good jump. And that's where that point of diminishing returns comes in, because once you're lit on a light wind kite, no ifs, ands, or buts, you're gonna be lit. You gotta get on something more appropriate for the wind speed you're riding in. So in summary here with the D-Lab Juice, this is just an incredibly well engineered piece of equipment. The new materials, I think it's super exciting we're seeing these come out. I do think it makes a difference. I do think that the experienced rider is going to get the most benefits out of this. And if you're somebody who wants the absolute most premium product, you're going to be stoked with the investment to get the kite that is going to get you those extra sessions, that has the added strength of a Lula, the added lightness, and you're getting the lightest, strongest, basically what everybody's been promising for years. They're actually delivering on with lighter, faster feeling, and stronger. We're actually seeing real improvement in that area with these design change. You're basically upgrading for the luxury of having something that doesn't feel like a light wind kite, in my opinion. And obviously, if you're somebody who loves to fly 8 meters, anything above 12 is going to feel like a big kite, but you get what I'm getting at. So if you have any questions on this, let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button. I will catch you later.